So I'm Ian Stenton, and I'm 52.
And how long have you lived in Elsecar?
Well, so it was my grandparents lived here when I was a child, so I've always come here and spent summer holidays and things here. But I lived here when my grandparents died and my parents moved here. I did live here in my sort of late teens, 30 odd years ago, but I've lived here personally, if you like, for the last 15, 16 years.
And so what childhood memories do you have of living in Elsecar?
A lot. So, it was a lot of my summer holidays were here, and my cousins in particular. All my memories of my time with my cousins, and it being sort of just post-industrial at the time. That it was quite a sooty place. It had that smell of coal tar, and when you smell that smell, it's very evocative of my childhood. Is that fairly sweet tarry smell is how Elsecar smelt at the time, and it brings back some very pleasant memories. It sounds like an unpleasant smell, but it's not. And so yeah, I've always loved Elsecar, and it's been, my family's been here for generations.
What kind of things did you do with your cousins when you were here?
So it was. It wasn't long after the works had closed here, so so there was a lot of sort of outhouses and buildings and so projects. So my granddad used to have us doing building projects or moving soil around to make a new flower bed, or and it was the equipment. It was sort of old, very old 18th century but industrial strength, crowbars and picks and shovels and things like that, which we've still got many of those tools now. So I just remember being put in a hard hat and set to work from being 3 years old, to help with the various projects.
Starting young, as they say.
Yeah.
And so when growing up, what did you think of Elsecar when you were growing up? Did you see it change? Did you see, things unfold there? How did that make you feel?
Yeah. So as a kid, I remember there was the railway lines used to come down from the pit, and it's spread out across towards Distillery side. There'd be, it's difficult to remember, but 10 or 12 railway lines side by side. So I remember sort of jumping from one to the other along there's kind of buffers on the end, so that was, it used to play jumping across them and things of that sort. And it did have a very much an industrial feel to it back then. Many of the buildings that are now part of the Heritage Centre were actually still used as storage and things of that sort.
What were some of your favourite parts of Elsecar when you were young?
The woods, to be honest. I used to love the woods. It was something we always used to come at the weekends, and we'd go up into the woods and play games, and set up tight ropes, and there was a pond that I remember falling into as a small child that didn't go down well, because we'd be in church best, if you like, Sunday best, if we were here on a Sunday, and my dad coming home in his Sunday best to fish me out of this pond that is now been filled in, but it was a header reservoir for the pit. So yeah.
And then later on, so about the 70s, 80s, do you have any memories, experiences of Elsecar maybe a bit later on from in those time periods?
So the miners' strike obviously was the big event, and then the closure of the various pits. I was at school at the time, and so I guess I didn't understand all the politics of it, if you like, but I remember the change in kind of the demeanour of the area, really, that people started, there's a lot of people. Initially there was as people being made redundant and there were large payouts, people were starting their own businesses and doing things like that. But it definitely, there was a kind of a downturn in people's hope for the future, if you like, once the pits weren't there, and there was a lot of closures, a lot of reduction in the amount of people working in the steelworks. So it had quite an impact on the school. I went to school in Ecclesfield, and I remember definitely the atmosphere was quite subdued in those days.
So yeah, and what would you say happened to maybe the community of Elsecar then? Would you say you felt maybe as close to them, or?
Yeah, so certainly my grandparents who they were both born in Elsecar and grew up here. So if we went out for a walk, or we're out in the we did a lot of things. I remember helping my granddad fetching shopping for people and things of that sort. And taking people to hospital appointments, all those kinds of things. So there was there was a real strong community back then, but but it was an age group. It was my grandparents' age meant that a lot of the people retired, mining people, and everybody did know each other, and it felt like there was the arms of Elsecar was surrounded everybody here, and as that generation started to die out, there wasn't. It felt like it was becoming even more downtrodden because people didn't want to move into the area because it didn't have any prospects. There was no real work in the area. So yes, there was started to be a few empty houses and things of that sort, and then it started to turn around. So I've just seen Elsecar go from strength to strength from the 80s through to modern day, where it's become a really nice place to live. The park's fantastic. There's a lot of green space. The Heritage Centre, all those things have made it a really nice place to.
I love the arms of Elsecar, by the way. I love the idea that Elsecar is this encompassing, come here, you are part of us.
Yeah.
And I think you've actually nearly answered what I'm going to ask next, but what are some of your favourite parts of Elsecar today?
Oh, so the things you just said. The trail, I quite like running, and we all like the whole family likes cycling. So we follow the trail down and go to the bird sanctuary and Mambas. So it's a good route out there. The park, we particularly through lockdown, we weren't able to travel. In fact, we were able to go up to the park and walk around the reservoir and it did feel some of that community spirit started to come back. As we came out to clap for the NHS, we were able to wave at all the neighbours, and it was that little bit of social interaction that we had. So it's I felt, as I said, the Elsecar's really come to its fore again now. There is that community again, more than it was, and there's been the investment in the heritage and in the the other aspects of it. And it seems like there's going to be more investment again. So yeah, it's doing really well, Elsecar.
Looking bright for the future.
Very much so, yeah.
Much so. And what are some of your favourite parts of Elsecar's history, like your personal favourite parts of Elsecar's history?
So obviously the Earl Fitzwilliam connection, or the Fitzwilliam family connection. So that meant that they had connection with royalty. So there's been various royal visits over the years. I've got some photographs of I can't remember which king, but obviously some time ago, if it was a king, coming to where the Heritage Centre, because obviously Earl Fitzwilliam's personal train station was just only 50 yards from here. So if he brought sort of VIPs in, they would come into the train station and then be taken up to Wentworth House from here. So there's I've got some I've seen some old photographs of some well-to-do people that came to the area, it's fascinating to understand the various strikes that's been over the years and the sort of struggles that the miners have had. I've obviously got various members of my family were miners and going back years, and they when they were on strike and there wasn't a great deal of income, they would sort of dig the bell pits in the woods to get the coal out themselves. And those pits are still there. You can go and see where they as a private enterprise, if you like, or a personal enterprise, where people would dig large bell pits to get the coal out to heat their own homes, because they didn't have income at the time.
And so what was it like for your family if you had members who were in the mining community? What was it like for you and your family at the time during the miners' strike?
I was fairly young, so I would have been protected from it a little bit. But I remember having to board up the windows and things like that because we were so close, almost in the shadow of the pit wheels and things like that. There was a lot of battles with the police and things of that sort. So things got damaged and broken along the way. But in terms of community, it brought the community together even more, and so yeah, they had some elements of it that were enjoyable from a community, but very difficult financially and work wise.
And so you say that your grandparents were born in Elsecar then, and I know of course that you have connections to, you were introduced to the heritage that they brought, introduced you to.
Hmm.
And so what was their story? So why were they in Elsecar?
So it goes back another generation. So it was my great grandparents were the first to live here. Wow, there's so many members of my family. I've got years going back into Elsecar. So my dad's side with the manager. He was the manager from around about 1900 of the gasworks, and then when he retired in about 1927, my granddad took over as being chief engineer for Earl Fitzwilliam and manager of the gasworks, and then it was eventually privatised, and he stayed as a manager then, and then when it closed in the 1960s, he bought what was his house, the manager's house, because obviously there weren't the works here, and then sort of removed the works, took down and sort of cleared up the land and everything like that. So that was my dad's side. On my dad's mum's side, they had a shop on Church Street, and dating back to sort of, again, that sort of time, early part of the sort of 1900, 1910 sort of time, they had a shop on Church Street, which is still, the building is still there, and you can see it used to be a shop, but it's an office now. So then my granny's sister was a teacher at the school, at Elsecar School, and then eventually became the head teacher for many years, around about the 1930s. On my mum's side, my granddad delivered the coal, so had originally wagon and horses, and would fetch the coal from the various pits and deliver it around the area. And his wife, my mum's mum, had a milk round, so she delivered the milk or by horseback on horse and cart originally. They did eventually get a vehicle.
And so the gasworks, where would they have been in Elsecar then? The actual gas cylinders, the actual works themselves?
Yeah. So it was both sides of the road, both sides of Worth Road. So the ovens were where we built the two new houses now, at this house that we're in. This is where the underground furnaces, coking ovens, where there were 6 of them that were below ground. We had to remove them before we could build a house and sort of remediate the land. So this is where the majority of the work was done, and you're perhaps familiar with the process. It was coal was brought down on the trains from the the few 100 yards, half mile, whatever, from the pit, and I think other pits as well. It was put into the ovens and heated, and that drove town gas off it, and that town gas then was what people had in their gas tap, what the ovens worked off, and that was used until I think around about the 1950s, 1960s, when North Sea gas took over and town gas fell into disuse. So this area just became a storage tank at the time. But there were 2 large gasometers, as they were called, the big circular tanks, one on what should we call it, the south side of Worth Road, and one on the north side of Worth Road.
So the field out there, for example, would they have been on that side of would the gas tanks been on there then?
Yes, so directly opposite here, and in front of the old row, was the main gasometer. So that was mostly storage on that side, and the old row had allotments in front of it, so they were all allotments. So it was, there was always somebody out there working in the allotments. So that was the main area of that field was either allotments or the gas tanks. And so my great granddad was the manager at that time, and so there are still a row of 8 trees out there that were planted by him, one for each of his 8 children. So.
Because people might walk past and think, oh, it's just a field of trees, and this must have been there for a while, but it's actually got a story then, the trees and the field.
Yeah. So over 100 years though, so they're not the row of 8 hawthorn trees, and there's actually more than 8 now, so they're obviously self-seeded, but you can see the original 8 are still there, and they're in bloom just at the moment, so they're at their best. People often refer to them as May trees, hawthorn, so because they blossom in May.
And so did your grandparents and great-grandparents ever say